Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Stadium Stats. This week we're going to be going into Week 10 of the NFL and predicting each game and who will win and who will lose each matchup. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with our Thursday night football game, we've got a battle of some really bad teams, the Panthers and the Bears. And the Panthers, they did finally get their first win a couple weeks ago against the Texans. Bryce Young really struggled last week, though. He had 3 interceptions, including 2 pick sixes to the same guy on the defense. Their offense really just isn't doing much. Adam Thielen has been the only real receiver on that team, and even he struggled last week. Their offense looks really bad. Their defense has not been much better. The Bears, on the other hand, not sure at this point, as of when I'm recording this, if Justin Fields or Tyson Bagent will be playing. Tyson Bagent has been struggling as of late, which is expected. He's a rookie out of a D2 school. He's very, very raw. While I don't know who's going to play, I do think, regardless of who's at quarterback, Tyson Bagent or Justin Fields, the Bears are a slightly better team, but this is going to be a close matchup. Both teams are pretty bad, but I do think the Bears will win. And also, fun fact, Bears do have the Panthers' first-round pick, so regardless of the outcome here, the Bears get a better pick for one of their first-rounders and a worse pick for the other one. Moving on to our first Sunday football game, and it's our last international game. It's the Colts versus the Patriots. The Colts are coming off a major win over the Panthers, which, as I was just saying, the Panthers are not a very good team. It doesn't say a ton about the Colts. Josh Downs did, their rookie receiver did get hurt during that game and did not return. He probably will not be playing in this game, meaning they're down to just Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce. Although Michael Pittman has been playing really well all season, Jonathan Taylor finally getting back on track. Their run game looking really good between him and Zach Moss, although Zach Moss is being phased out a little bit for Jonathan Taylor. That defense, though, had looked much improved last week. They only let up 13 points, and they'd had multiple pick sixes. It was a pretty good game for the Colts, whereas the Patriots, coming off another loss, this time to the Washington Commanders, the Commanders had just traded away 2 of their best defensive linemen, and yet they still won this game. The Patriots are a really bad team. They're dead last in the AFC. Mac Jones is not playing very well. That offense, they have no receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster got paid $11 million a year, just like Jacoby Myers, yet he hasn't done almost anything. They lost their leading receiver in Kendrick Bourne to a torn ACL, who will be out for the rest of the season. The Patriots don't have much hope. The Colts are going to win this game, most likely. Moving on, we have a divisional matchup between the Browns and the Ravens. This whole division, the AFC North, is arguably the best division in football right now. They, as of right now, are set to have all 4 teams make the playoffs if the season were to end before Week 10, which obviously it's not going to. However, it's really impressive that all 4 teams have winning records and are in the playoff picture right now. The Browns, coming off a win over the Cardinals, they shut the Cardinals out. It was never close. It was 27-0. And yes, the Cardinals are a bad football team. And yes, they had a rookie quarterback in Clayton Tune starting in his first game. But to put up 0, that Browns defense really is something special. And they actually looked pretty decent on offense too. Amari Cooper had a really nice day. I do think the Browns are a very good football team. But the Ravens, oh my gosh. The Ravens looked incredible last week. That's 2 of the last 3. They won all 3 of their last 3 games. However, 2 of those games were absolute blowouts against some of the best contenders in the NFC. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are incredible against NFC teams, as Lamar has only lost to one NFC team ever. But this Ravens team looks incredible. They're one of the best teams in football. They're winning the division for a reason. I do think this game will be incredibly close, as they're both really good teams, and it's a divisional matchup, but I do think that the Ravens will win. Up next, we've got a battle between the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, coming off a really close win. Kenny Pickett led a nice game-winning drive. He's been really good at those fourth-quarter game-winning drives, but their offense has really struggled all season. They keep putting up very few points on the board. but their defense is so good. So good. TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick and Alex Highsmith, they're all playing incredible football. Whereas the Packers, on the other hand, yes, they won last week, but they are a struggling football team. Jordan Love has really, yes, he's had his moments early in the season, but he's looked really shaky since. He's still relatively new to the game, as this is his first season starting, so it's still too early to say on him. However, he has not looked very good over the past several weeks. That offense really can't do very much, although they looked pretty decent against the Rams. But that was their first offensive touchdown in the first half since really early on in the season. And their defense hasn't really made up for the lack of offense. Their defense is supposed to be a lot better than it is, and it's just not living up to the expectations. The Packers are not very good. The Steelers are relatively good, especially their defense. I think the Steelers will win. Up next, we have a really interesting matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Niners, they're coming off a bye, a much-needed bye, after having lost 3 straight games. They started the season off 5-0 and are now 5-3, coming off a bye. And I think there could be a lot of improvement for this team, as Chase Young was just traded for a third-round pick at the trade deadline. Chase Young, really talented player, having a great season so far, and could really just add a lot of depth to that defensive line, which has really struggled to put pressure onto the QBs. Even with Nick Bosa playing really well, he hasn't been finishing those sacks, and they just need another body on that defensive line that's powerful and really talented, and Chase Young is that. I'm excited to see what he can do, but the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're on a 5-game win streak. They have the longest active win streak in the league. They look incredible, although they are really not living up to their fullest potential, which makes them an even scarier team because there's just that much more room for them to grow, and yet they've still won 5 straight. They do keep turning the ball over on offense, fumbles, a couple interceptions, but their defense looks elite. Their defense is so good and is really making up for these offensive mistakes. And the offense isn't looking bad. It's still looking pretty good. So while I do think the Jacksonville Jaguars are a really good team and one of the best teams in football right now, I do think the San Francisco 49ers will come out swinging out of their bye, especially with Chase Young now on their team. And I do think that while this will be a very close game between two really good teams, the 49ers are going to come out swinging and win. Up next, we have the New Orleans Saints taking on the Minnesota Vikings. The Saints coming off a win over the Bears. As I said earlier, the Bears are not a very good football team, but the Saints did look pretty decent in that game. Derek Carr finally getting into the swing of things with this team. He's making a lot less mistakes. He's throwing a lot more touchdowns and yards. Taysom Hill, really elite weapon. First player in decades to have 10 receiving, rushing, and passing touchdowns, which is just such a unique weapon that they have. Chris Olave obviously looking really good, and that defense is really, really living up to their expectations as of late. On the other hand, we have the Vikings, who are coming off one of the most impressive wins of last week. And yes, it was a really close comeback win, but why it was so impressive was because they traded for Josh Dobbs less than a week ago, and yet he came in relief of Jaron Hall. And while he barely knew the names of his own teammates, as he later said he knew very few people in that huddle, he still led the team to a win, had an excellent stat line, and looked really good in relief of Kirk Cousins, who is sadly going to miss the rest of the season with an Achilles tear. So the Vikings do have some hope with Josh Dobbs, but he is still not Kirk Cousins. It is a slight step down, and the Saints have looked really good over the past couple weeks. I think this will also be a really close game, as both of these teams have been playing really well as of late, but the Vikings are on a multiple game win streak, and I don't see that ending to the New Orleans Saints. So I think the Vikings will win. Up next, we have the Texans taking on the Bengals. Both of these teams had amazing performances last week. As the Texans, C.J. Stroud just put up an all-time rookie quarterback record, 470 passing yards, most ever by a rookie quarterback. He also had 5 passing touchdowns, which is tied for the most ever for a rookie quarterback. He played incredible. He didn't even have any interceptions. His 14-1 turnover ratio this season is the best touchdown to interception ratio since Tom Brady, and that's just ridiculously impressive. All their receivers were going crazy last week. They had Nico Collins with 50-plus yards and a touchdown. They had Tank Dell with over 100 yards and multiple touchdowns. They had Dalton Schultz with over 100 yards, and they had Noah Brown with over 100 yards. That team played incredible. Their defense, on the other hand, not so much. They let up 37 points to the Buccaneers, who do not have that good of an offense. It was kind of a poor showing, as it was just a shootout of a game, but it was such an impressive performance by that offense. The Bengals, on the other hand, are coming off another win. They're now 4 wins in a row, 2 of which were back-to-back wins over the San Francisco 49ers and the Buffalo Bills, 2 impressive wins. Joe Burrow's looking finally like he's back to form, and T. Higgins also looks back to form, as he had a great night on Sunday. This team looks much improved from where they were at the beginning of the season, and they are one of the biggest Super Bowl contenders. They are one of the best teams in the entire AFC or the entire NFL. And I do think the Bengals will win this one, even with that high-powered offense of the Texans. I think the Bengals defense is just too good compared to the Texans defense, and both offenses are very explosive. Up next, we've got the Titans taking on the Buccaneers. The Titans, coming off a heartbreaking fourth quarter loss to the Steelers. They couldn't stop that fourth quarter drive by Kenny Pickett and ended up losing. Their team, yes, Will Levis did throw an interception and looked a lot worse than he did the previous week, but that's expected. He was a second-round rookie quarterback. You're not expecting him to have only incredible games, and he didn't play bad by any means. That interception was him trying to force a throw because he didn't have a choice. It was either you make that throw or you lose the game. So, yes, that interception, it makes sense why he threw it. Yeah, he didn't have any touchdowns, but he still looked pretty good. Derrick Henry got a touchdown. He looked pretty decent again. And DeAndre Hopkins came back from the grave a couple weeks ago and looks like he's really going to be helpful to Will Levis. That offense is much improved with Will Levis under center. On the other hand, that defense has only gone downhill this season, especially after they traded Kevin Byard to the Eagles. They just are a really incomplete football team, which can also be said about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as, yeah, they were thought to have one of the best defenses in the league, and then they just let up 39 points to the Texans. It was a really poor performance by that Buccaneers defense, but a really good performance by their offense to be able to keep up. Rashad White had a really good game, multiple touchdowns, had over 100 all-purpose yards, and looked really good. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as a receiving duo continue to be great. And Cade Otton had an incredible game as well at the tight end position. Baker Mayfield does look better than people thought he would be going into the season, and this team can compete, and I do think that they are still better than the Titans. So I think I'm going to pick the Buccaneers over the Titans to win this game. Up next, we've got a matchup between the Detroit Lions and the LA Chargers. The Lions, coming off a bye week, previous week, they played on Monday Night Football against the Las Vegas Raiders and played so well that the Raiders ended up firing Josh McDaniels, firing their offensive coordinator. No, I'm kidding. That was not all because the Lions played so well. The game ended up being really close, but the Lions outgained the Raiders by 300 or 400 yards. They played really, really well. They just didn't score points always. They had some turnovers, but the biggest takeaway was, yes, they got a win, but Jahmyr Gibbs, their first-round rookie running back, looked incredible. He had 150 yards. He just looked like that guy at running back, and yes, it's a really risky move to pick a running back in the first round, but this guy looks special. He can receive the ball, he can rush with the ball, and he's just special playmaker when he has the ball in his hands. It looked really nice to have him out on that field, and I can't wait to see what he continues to do. On the other hand, we have the Chargers, who are coming off a big victory, a massive victory on Monday Night Football against the Jets, starting off with a punt return touchdown. And yeah, in this game, Justin Herbert did not play that well. He really didn't need to do much, though, because they won 27-6 because of their defense and special teams. And yes, a little help from Austin Eckler as well. Eckler looked great, Keenan Allen looked great, but that defense and special teams are really the reason they won by so much against the Jets. They are still not one of the top teams this year. Despite their talent level on that team, they're still only 4-4, whereas the Lions are 6-2. I think the Lions are a more complete team and are a much better coached team, and I think that's the biggest difference maker there, is while the Chargers are not very well coached, the Lions have a similar level of skill, if not more, and have much better coaching. So I do think the Lions will come out with a win. Up next, we've got a bird matchup between the Falcons and the Cardinals. The Falcons coming off a heartbreaking loss to Josh Dobbs and the Vikings. Josh Dobbs came in relief of Jaron Hall, who got injured really early. And yeah, Josh Dobbs didn't know the names of his own teammates, and yet he beat the Falcons. It was a poor performance by the Falcons. Arthur Smith, their head coach, continues to not utilize his weapons, such as Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, who they've used first-round picks on in the past 3 years. They continue to not utilize them to their best abilities. They continue to fall short of what they really could be on offense, and that defense let up a lot of yards and points to Josh Dobbs, who barely knew the offense he was running. It was a really poor performance, whereas the Cardinals had an even worse performance. They lost 27-0 to the Browns, which was just awful. They've been playing teams really close most of the year, even though they're a bad team, but this was never close at any point. They couldn't even score once. They do have Kyler Murray coming back, which should be a big boost to this offense, as he's a big improvement over Clayton Tune from last week, and who knows if he'll be much of an improvement from Josh Dobbs. We'll have to see where he's at in his recovery process and where he's at just as a quarterback in the NFL at this point. But especially given that Josh Dobbs looked really good, but it should be a boost to this offense, and I'm excited to see him come back. But the Cardinals are a really bad football team. The Falcons, yeah, they're not great, but they're better than the Cardinals, and they should win this game. Up next, we've got a divisional matchup between the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't think I really need to say much on this game. Giants are down to their third-string quarterback, as Danny Dimes or Daniel Jones did tear his ACL and is out for the rest of the season. Tyrod Taylor, their backup quarterback, has a rib injury and is also on IR, so they're down to their third-string quarterback, which they were using him a couple weeks ago. It really didn't go well. They had -9 passing yards and lost a game they should have won otherwise. Yeah, Saquon Barkley can maybe hold their offense afloat, but it's very unlikely they do very much with Tommy DeVito in at quarterback, and they were really bad with any quarterback under center to begin with. So it's really not looking hopeful for the Giants. Not to mention, the last time they played the Cowboys, which was week 1, they lost 40-0. Yes, the Cowboys did lose last week to the Eagles, but they played them really close. It is a divisional matchup, and the Eagles are a slightly better team than the Cowboys to begin with. But it was a really close game, and I do think the Cowboys are a very good football team, whereas the New York Giants are not. So the Cowboys should win this game pretty easily, even with it being a divisional matchup. Up next, we've got the Washington Commanders taking on the Seattle Seahawks. The Commanders just traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young to the Bears and the 49ers, respectively. They didn't really get that much in return, as they got a second and a third-round pick, and their D-line has now gone way downhill in terms of skill, as they went from one of the best D-lines in the league to just average. It's a huge downgrade and a huge loss for them, but they are now a rebuilding team. They don't have much of a positive outlook on this season. It's just at this point developing Sam Howell, seeing if he is their guy, which he's been playing really well. It continues to show that he could be a really good quarterback in this league. He just needs some more time. The Seahawks, on the other hand, are a very good team, but that was one of the worst performances of the entire season. They got absolutely demolished by the Ravens. They lost that game 37-3. It was never close at any point. Geno Smith didn't look very good. Kenneth Walker couldn't do anything on the ground. And yes, the Ravens are a suffocating defense. They're a really good team, but it was a really poor performance by the Seahawks. It doesn't give you a lot of hope for their future, but they are still a very good football team. They were in the lead of their division before that loss, although that lead has now been handed back to the San Francisco 49ers. But the Seahawks are a much better team than the Commanders. This shouldn't be very close. Seahawks win. Up next on Sunday Night Football, we've got the Jets facing the Raiders. The Jets coming off a heartbreaking, terrible loss to the Chargers after winning 3 straight. They were never in that game. Zach Wilson looked horrible. Garrett Wilson even fumbled the ball early on, and their special teams let up a punt return touchdown in the first quarter. Nothing was going right for them at any point during that game, and they didn't look like a complete team at all. Their defense did hold up really well, and Breece Hall played pretty decently, but that was not nearly enough to beat the Chargers as they lost 27-6. The Raiders, on the other hand, demolished the Giants, and this was with their interim head coach's first game coaching in the NFL. He won big against the Giants. The Giants did lose Daniel Jones in that game, and the Giants are a really bad football team, so I don't think that says too much about the Raiders, and I don't think their coaching situation is going to be that great. This is a guy who's never coached in the NFL before, who's stepping in the middle of the season as an interim head coach. It probably isn't going to go incredibly well, but I'm excited to see what they can do. I do think he's still going to be a step up from Josh McDaniels, who got fired after that loss to the Lions. But the Jets are a better team. Their defense is really good. Their run game is really good. The Raiders don't have that much going for them, but they look like they have a new spark of life without Josh McDaniels, and I'm excited to see if that can continue. Maybe this will be a close game, but I do think the Jets will win. Up last, we've got the Broncos taking on the Bills on Monday Night Football. The Broncos coming off a bye after their big win over the Chiefs. Yeah, I don't know what that says about them, because they have been a really inconsistent football team all season long, as they let up 70 to the Dolphins earlier on in the season, but then let up only 9 to the Kansas City Chiefs. They're a really perplexing team, and I'm curious to see what they can do. The Bills, on the other hand, are a really underperforming team. They're really talented. They should be in the lead of their division, yet the Dolphins are, and the Bills are now barely over 500 at 5-4. I do think the Bills will use this as a get-right game, as the Broncos are still not a very good football team, even with them beating the Chiefs. The Bills really need this win to stay in the playoff picture. They're currently not even in the playoffs, but they're in the hunt, so they really need this win. I do think they're a much better team than the Broncos, but the Broncos beat the Chiefs, so who knows? But Bills win. Looking at my power rankings going into Week 10, coming in at number 10, I've got the Dallas Cowboys. They look like a complete football team, and while they did just lose to the Eagles are a very, very good football team, and it's a divisional matchup. The fact that they played them that close is a really good sign. The Dallas Cowboys defense is really, really good, especially Deron Bland, who has stepped up in a large way with 3 pick-sixes on the season in Trayvon Diggs' absence. That defense looks great. That offense can perform whenever they need to. Dak Prescott has turned the ball over a lot less this season. CeeDee Lamb looked incredible a couple weeks ago, and I do think that this team can go very far. They just struggle against good teams. In at number 9, I've got the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins, coming off a big loss to the Chiefs. However, they look incredible against the bad teams and look really pedestrian against good teams. It's a really big split for them, where they're 0-3 against teams with a winning record and 6-0 versus teams with losing records. They really take advantage and beat up on bad teams. They put up a lot of points. Their offense is really explosive, but it can't perform in the games that they really need it to perform in, such as against the Chiefs and the Bills and the Eagles as well. They lost all three of those games, and it wasn't incredibly close in most of those games, but they do still have a really explosive offense. I cannot take that away from them, and their defense has only gotten better, especially with the addition of Jalen Ramsey. They will just continue to have the title of a team that can't win when it really matters, can't beat good teams, and it'll be hard for them to break that until their next matchup with a team with a winning record. In at number 8, I've got the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers, coming off a bye week, coming off 3 straight losses before that, they are still first in their division with a tied record with the Seahawks. The only reason they're still on this list is because they at one point looked like the most complete football team. They have since shown some holes in their team. Their defense has looked a lot more raw and poor in these most recent games. But the addition of Chase Young should help with that, and I'm excited to see where Chase Young can take this defense and just in general see how this team can correct their mistakes from the time off on their bye week. I do think they'll come out swinging, and I'm excited to see where they can go. In at number 7, I've got the Browns. I have them above the 49ers as they beat them a couple weeks ago, starting that 49ers losing streak. The Browns are currently in the playoff picture as they are in a wild card with the rest of the AFC North. Their defense continues to be one of the best units in the entire league. They just held the Cardinals to 0 points. They've held really good teams such as the San Francisco 49ers. They do look like one of the best defenses in the entire league without a doubt, but their offense does have some struggles. Deshaun Watson finally back in there. Still really hard to say what he can be with this team as he doesn't look like the player he once was, but is definitely possible to be a big improvement over P.J. Walker, who they had in place while Deshaun Watson was hurt. So it's really hard to say where that offense can go, but their defense looks so elite that they need to be in the top 10. In at number 6, I've got the Cincinnati Bengals, who are on a 4-game win streak, 2 of which were against really good teams in the 49ers and the Bills. Joe Burrow looks back to form. T. Higgins looks back to form. Jamar Chase looks incredible. Tyler Boyd, that whole receiving core looks really good. Their defense looks really, really top tier this year and has really been effective, especially against the Bills this past week. I'm excited to see how this team can continue to improve, especially given they were so bad at the beginning of the season. It's really nice to see them on this upward swing, and I do think that they're making a Super Bowl push. In at number 5, I've got the Lions. The Lions have had 2 losses this season, one to the Seahawks in a really close game, and one in a blowout loss to the Baltimore Ravens. They look like they can be a complete football team. Their offense, it looks amazing. Their run game, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, looks really, really, really good. The receiving game with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, their rookie tight end, and Jameson Williams coming back, and now they're newly traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Their offense really has a lot of potential, especially with Jared Goff under center. And their defense has one of the best run defenses in the entire league. But their pass defense is not anything elite. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it's not elite. But this team is very well-rounded. The only thing that has knocked them so far down was their massive loss to the Baltimore Ravens. Do have to hold that against them, even though the Seahawks have done the same. Seahawks are now off my power rankings because of it. So I think the Lions can be a really good team, can be a complete team. They just need to be able to play opponents that will not take advantage of the matchup, such as the Baltimore Ravens, who will tend to play really good against the NFC teams. And therefore, I do have to hold that against the Lions in some way, and that's why they're down at number 5. In at number 4, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, they lost to the Lions in week 1, but that was a while ago, and they were missing 2 of their biggest players on their team in Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. They've looked only better since week 1, with their only loss coming to the Denver Broncos in a really horrific game. However, Patrick Mahomes did have the flu in that game. Don't know how much you can really hold that against him. Their offense looks a lot worse than it has in previous years, as they really don't have a top receiver at all. Rashee Rice, their rookie receiver, has been their best receiver and hasn't been that good. Travis Kelce continues to be elite, of course, at tight end. But the real star this year has been that Kansas City defense, which has been lights out. It's so good. It's one of the best units in the entire league. And to go along with Patrick Mahomes, Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Kelce, and Rashee Rice on offense, this team is really good. And that's why they're in at number 4. And at number 3, I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are, as I said earlier, on the longest win streak in the NFL with 5 wins in a row. They aren't the most complete they can be, as they do keep turning the ball over. They keep having fumbling issues, but that defense is so good, really stopping other teams, really putting pressure on, especially Josh Allen, who's having a career year on defense, and that offense still can do a lot. Travis Etienne at running back has been really amazing this year, one of the best running backs in the entire league. And their offense with Trevor Lawrence and their receiving trio has also been really good, although I would like to continue to see more out of Calvin Ridley. I just need to see this team clean up their sloppiness with their fumbling issues, and then I do think that they could be even higher than number 3. In at number 2, I've got the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, the only reason they're below what everybody knows is number 1 in the Kansas City Chiefs. The only reason the Ravens are below is because of their record. The Ravens have now had 2 in their last 3 weeks be incredibly big blowout wins over really good contenders in the NFC. It says a lot about just how complete they can be. They have the best point differential in the entire league at 115, where the next closest is not even 80. They look like the best football team in the league. But you know what matters more is wins. And the Philadelphia Eagles are stacking wins. They're 8-1. They're the only team that's 8-1. They also look like a complete football team. Maybe not quite as much as the Ravens, but they're not losing games like the Ravens, who dropped a game to the Colts and the Steelers. Yes, the Steelers is a divisional matchup. However, the Ravens have dropped games that the Eagles just aren't dropping. The Eagles look more complete than the Ravens because they're winning these games. They're coming out with the victory at the end, even in really close matchups. The Eagles do continue to play games close, especially against divisional opponents in the Commanders 2 weeks ago and the Cowboys last week. They have looked really good, though, as they are always able to squeak out the win, except against the Jets, but they're almost always able to squeak out the win, which says a lot about who they are as a football team. And I do think that for that reason, the Philadelphia Eagles are number 1. That'll be all for this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.